So we'd like to be able to read to you as well some of the ecological submissions that have gone into the Federal Minister that were also submitted, some of them in 2011, in anticipation of the concept plan, because there's been so many subdivisions applied and lodged for this site over a 20-year period. And so what they've done is shaved off sections and approved small amounts for the overall site. But this is the last division where they want to put in almost 130 houses, 127 to be exact, and 2 medium density, and 3 public reserves, which will make up nothing of retained habitat, but really merely mowed lawns and replanted trees. So we're just going to give you the initials of some of these ecologists, because some of it might end up in other areas, so we want to keep their privacy. But JG has said that, also another expert ecologist, through my work I've witnessed the pressure of unsustainable development in the Byron Shire. These developments are always impacting on the remaining wildlife and reducing habitat. The failure of legislation to protect our natural heritage is appalling and needs immediate attention to stop future loss. In recent years, we have watched the effects of climate change and the extreme loss of species. The drought and the fires of 2019 were serious, but even more serious is what's ahead. The intense rainfall of 22, landslides and flooding has had far-reaching effects on the local native vegetation and habitat for our wildlife. Currently, we are experiencing a shortage of food for many species, especially the flying fox and the threatened bats, which are our major pollinators for our native plants. The Wallum habitat, if it's to be lost under this proposal, is another severe loss to the remaining native species. Like many of the ecologists in this area, I object to the concept plan of this proposed development in 2011, and I object again in 2023. Now, with the loss of species and under climate scenarios, the further loss of this valuable coastal land is a disaster for threatened species and will only facilitate the demise of species loss and impacts of habitat for over what we thought was a dozen in the approved plans, but now we're discovering over 100 species, including, as we've mentioned, the koala, rainforest snail, Wallum sedge frog, several bats, and the koshoroo. It has been highlighted by many experts in planning and ecology in our area that the previous approvals for this site, which were approved by the New South Wales state government in transition arrangements through the Clause 34 that Svea mentioned before, would not stand today, as they fall well short of current state, federal and local laws. Our requirements are outlined in the Biodiversity Control Plan regarding environmental offset, buffers and preservation. So why do environmental laws back from 10 years ago apply for a development now that is getting approved or was approved in May this year? Why are we using old legislation, environmental legislation? Because there's something critically wrong with our value system. We have an economic planning value system that overrides our environmental laws and our value and need in protecting these threatened species. These environmental laws mean nothing if they're not actually enforced or honoured. And because they take second place to the planning laws, this is where these threatened species have no protection at all.
And there's actually, to interject here, Luciana, there's another point with this site for people who aren't familiar with the campaign or what's been going on here, where the central area is actually a Wallum heathland, and that's sort of a biodiverse area of wildflowers, and sort of smaller vegetation. It does include banksias and some woody vegetation, but it's been slashed for a number of years illegally. And the proponents and the owners of the site have basically maintained it's been grassland, pasture. We've seen it written out as being grazing land, and that's not true at all. It's not accurate. There's a huge biodiversity of wildflowers and a seed bank there that would germinate if there was any fire disturbance on the site. That is highly diverse. It includes the unique endemic Byron orchid, the donkey orchid that's only found in this shire, a number of floral species, but that sort of it's discrimination, I guess, on vegetation class, but we tend to stand up for our forests more than our grasslands and our heathlands. And sadly, this development is another victim of that sort of judgment or value system that comes through, where we don't value the heathland and the wildflowers, even though they're incredibly rare. And it's a stunningly beautiful site that anybody who's come here has realised that slashing should never have been allowed to happen. And we found orders to prove that it is illegal and it should have stopped. However, the council has looked the other way, and for probably a decade it's been slashed annually. This year, since the campaign started, it's been slashed. They've tried 4 times now. And they knocked over a dozen of the rare duck orchids that were knocked over that day. It's just heartbreaking. So
I'm just slashing the Wallum and the Wallum froglet habitat and then denying it. So
it's all habitat for the Wallum sedge frog, the Wallum froglet that we know is found right across that heathland. All of their records, when they did go back in 2022 and did another wildlife survey specifically for the Wallum froglet that has the management plan, they found dozens of records right across the heathland. And then they tried to say it was an anomaly because of the floods.
And the approved plans that have been recently approved try to make out that only sections of the whole 30 hectares is used by the Wallum frog and the Wallum froglet, which is, again, lies, inaccuracies, flawed, poor.
It's quite unbelievable.
Surveys.